already left for greener pastures. 4 are still contracted with them. And the likelihood with the information that we are getting with unfunded posts, the likelihood is that these 4 might finish their contract and leave without being absorbed. And we know as a country we are confronted with an enemy of unemployment, which in the main affects the young people. And I want to believe these interns are young people. General Masondo there is leading a team of old age there. None of them are young there, as I'm looking.
You'll be surprised if he tells you your age. It's very young.
Oh, General Masondo.
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I'll be very surprised, Chair. No. On a lighter note, but the message I'm trying to put across is that opportunities are not. There's no much effort put towards ensuring that young people get these opportunities because they are at the lower level as interns, and they are likely not to be absorbed by the institution. They will then have to go back to contributing to the streets, contribute to unemployment, and it can't continue to be business as usual. These young people must be given an opportunity so that they grow within the organization. It can be correct. These old people must die so that new ones are born and take the organization forward. So that is my follow up, Chair, on that to get an understanding. Will they be absorbed? Maybe my good sir from DOD HR can also take the committee into confidence, because part of what I've seen being presented there is that the institution is frustrated because they've put a ceiling on them. I'm not sure whether the DOD on the ceiling put by the National Treasury, does that also affect military ombuds? Do they account for personnel of military ombuds? Or ombuds has got its own HR processes where it must account for its own personnel? How does that National Treasury ceiling then affect military ombuds? But Chair, before I also want to appreciate the fact that there is a forum created that will ensure that cases that or recommendations that are made by the military ombuds find resonance or are resolved or implemented speedily. I think it is incumbent upon us to ensure that to welcome that particular establishment of a forum, because we hope it will fast track some of the matters that were not adequately addressed timeously as they were supposed to be implemented. However, I want to indicate, because the response from General Masondo indicates that it was wrong for them to recommend with regard to recommending to say a person must be taken back to his or her post. I mean, why must it be different from CCM? What do they call it? CCM what? CCMA or CCM something, which is a body that actually does more or less similar work in terms of complaints or litigations from or deals with unfair dismissal, so forth and so on. If you were a CEO of an entity and CCMA says an organization must reinstate you, it will be clear they must reinstate you into that position. It can't be the CCMA problem to say, no, we must just say reinstate and not tell exactly where the person must be reinstated. I think this is what we deem as an undue influence from the department on the on military ombudsman, because now they are even afraid to make concrete decision on the basis that it will frustrate DOD. It is not their problem. If a person must be reinstated, that person must be reinstated. Whether DOD has put somebody in place, it is none of their problem. It must not suffice, like it does not suffice with CCMA. So on that matter, I don't agree with General Masondo. They must be decisive. They must not negotiate their recommendation or change them on the basis of the challenges that DOD might face, because it's not their problem in any event.
No, thank you so much. Just before I recognize other people, General, I was shocked by your statement as well, equally shocked. Let me tell you what you said. We must not come up with the recommendations that are difficult to implement. We need to be fair to the SNDF with respect to our recommendations. I'm shocked. I mean, you can't come up with a statement such as this. I mean, you are actually compromising the independence and the impartiality of the institution. Let me tell you, General, I mean, a chair of an institution like yours is given 7 years. And in the period, in the 7 years, and you are pitched at the level of a judge. At the level of a judge. That's how serious the lawmakers looked at the institution. They even said, General, that any person aggrieved by a decision of the ombuds may apply to the High Court for review against that decision within 180 days of the decision. And they're even saying, the act is even saying, the minister must afford the ombuds such assistance as may be reasonably required for the protection of independence, impartiality, and dignity of military ombuds. We need to go further. The act even goes further to say no person may hinder or obstruct the ombuds or members of his or her staff in the performance of his or her functions. You know, and then it goes on to say, Section 8 of the Act, if the ombuds oppose the complaint, the ombud must recommend the appropriate relief for implementation to the minister. There's just no way you can water that down. There's just no way. It must not depend on whether they are happy with the recommendation or not. You must speak truth to power. I think I'm so shocked by the statement, and if that is the approach, then people are going to lose confidence in the institution. I just want to leave it at that, and I did not want to comment, but your statement makes me to comment, General. And yes, the person who was next was Miss Motise, and then I will take Mr. Mare after her. Yes, Mr. Mare, after Miss Motise.
Thank you so much, Chair. The presentation would have made mention of the carried over cases. I think in 2019, they could have indicated about 168 cases that are carried over to the next financial year. I just want to check then the budget implications to that effect. That what happens then to the cases that are carried over to the next financial year? Do they carry over also the cost, or then they do a new budget for the cases of the previous year? Also on the turnaround time, the presentation has indicated that there's a turnaround time of about 8 months to deal with cases. I just want to check that in these 8 months, do they deal with one case at a time, or the number of cases that they would then deal with in the period of 8 months? But then that also speaks to the fact that cases get to be carried over to the next year due to the fact that they don't finish cases, or they don't conclude cases within the period of 10 to 12 months. I also want to get clarity with regard to priority of cases. Do they then put a distinct between cases that are reported, complaints from the public and complaints from members in uniform? Do they then prioritize them according to that, which one would then take priorities? There's cases from complaints from the public, or they would then speed up cases from members in uniform? Also, just to check that, has there been any complaints or cases during this period of COVID-19? With cases that then the department will then want to review the recommendations, does the military ombuds then communicate clearly to the complainants that, look, these are the investigations that were done, and these are the findings that we concluded on, and these are the recommendations that we would have made to the department. But now that there is no implementation from the department side, therefore you will need to wait thereof. I just want to check that, is there a clear line of communication between the military ombuds and to the complainants whilst cases are awaiting the reviewal or implementation from the department? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Modisa. Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to associate myself with your comment, valid, and it links to what we have mentioned earlier about the possible amendment of the Act, if that it needs to improve the enforcement of compliance, because if it's only recommendations and nobody wants to comply with that, then it, there's not much need in the military ombud. Just to General Masondo, when you talk about your employees and also the interns, to what extent are they professional people? So in other words, because that might implicate on the cost of personnel as well. Is it the people with low qualifications? Is it ordinary interns that you are taking in? To what extent, does that play a role in terms of professional knowledge and expertise that you might require in that regard? Thank you.
Thank you so much. In General, thank you so much for this. General, I now invite you to make a comment. I was earlier on tempted to mute all questions dealing with cases until the time when we have received the presentation of all cases, so that we don't deal with the case with that aspect piecemeal. So therefore, I'm sure members will agree with me. I'm muting them for now, so that we deal with them comprehensively immediately after receiving the presentation. But I expect them to deal with your comments as they make presentations, because they've been noting the questions. And so, General, I will invite you to deal with Ms. Bucher's questions for now, because they don't deal with the cases that will be with the second. They don't overlap onto the second item, right? And Mr. Mutles, yes. And then Ms. Modisa, I would request that we just put a hold on that one and then deal with that when you do the presentation. It would be immediately after this, when you deal with the presentation, and then we take further questions on it as well. Do you agree with me, Ms. Modisa?
Agreed, Chair. It's fine.
If it pleases the Chair, thank you so much.
And obviously mine as well must now be dealt with, because that's not
as well as okay. That's fine. Now yours will be dealt with because they don't relate to the cases.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
General, yes. Can you deal with those comments, General, and then pause, and then just pause when you come to the cases with your presentation. That is item number 2 on the agenda.
Thank you very much. I actually agree with that approach. Perhaps before Chair, I go to the issue of responding to questions. Context of the statement I made so that it's understood within that context. Chair, for instance, let's take a case where somebody, which is actually also a follow-up question from Honorable Muti, that somebody was in the post, was unfairly dismissed, and that person now has to be reinstated. But the situation is such that there's a new person in that post. So when you actually...
General.
Yes.
General.
Yes, sir.
General. I hear you want to pursue the point. Okay, pursue the point. But the relief is you have been unfairly dismissed, and the relief sought is reinstatement. You may continue.
No, Chair, the problem arises when...
I don't hear, General. I think your line is clear. General? Yes, General?
Yeah. Chair.
Yes, you are now clearer now. You're clear.
I'm saying I want to put context in terms of the statement I made, so that is clearly understood. I don't remember. You know, when the relief sought is reinstatement, and of course, the office will recommend a reinstatement. But if relief goes further than just reinstatement, but reinstatement in the post in which the person was before, I indicated that in the Defense Force, we cannot have a situation where a post is left vacant, waiting for somebody to come back and complain and get reinstated. So there will be a different person staffed in that post. So if you see that the person was...
Colleagues, sorry, General. So, General, sorry. Am I the only person who's experiencing this breakup?
No. I also, all of us.
Oh, I see. Yes, General, we are losing you in the process, yet you are making a valuable comment. Can you repeat again?
You need to also mute your mic as well.
I see. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to mute my mic and the video so that we give you sufficient time. Let me do that now. General, you may speak now. I just want to hear how it is going.
Yeah, Chair, I was trying to put context to the comment I made so that honorable members can understand clearly. And to do that, we're using the example where the recommendation says somebody was unfairly dismissed, and therefore the relief sought is that they must be reinstated, not just reinstated, but in the post in which he was. So how I want to explain this is that the SANDF cannot afford to have posts that are vacant, because each and every post is there for a purpose, and it requires somebody to fill it so that the work can continue. Now, when you recommend that somebody must be reinstated in the post in which he was, you are then saying that the person who now is in the post must be actually taken out of that post, and then maybe another post found for him. And that person will be taken out of the post, will themselves be aggrieved and lodge a complaint that I was properly staffed in a post, and what now I have to be taken out of that post because to accommodate somebody who is coming back. you know. And of course, in situations like that, it really makes things difficult for the Chief of the National Defence Force, because we must understand that it is the prerogative of the Chief of the National Defence Force to utilize members of the SANDF wherever it thinks they'll be effective. And therefore, when you recommend like that, it's like an overreach from the point of our office. So that's why I was talking about fairness, balancing fairness between the complaint and the complainant and the SANDF as an organization. And perhaps I would ask CHR to also come in and assist in terms of this check.
Thank you, General Masondo.
General. Hello?
Yes, sir.
General,
Can you hear me, Chair?
do you have enough airtime? Do you have enough airtime or data?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Proceed.
You keep all right, someone invited. Okay, welcome. Yes, sir.
The question that we received from Honorable Pierkes, of course, the first was just a comment. The first question is about the complaint of the Khoisan. Chair,
General,
yes, Chair.
there's a serious problem. Hello? Hello? General, we can't hear you. Colleagues,
Well,
I'm
okay,
sure you can. Colleagues,
assisting us here, Chair. Can you hear me now, Chair?
hey, General, is difficult. You know, I'm sure one of your colleagues. Yes, Tabo.
Chair, we can hear probably your airtime as well is the big T.
I see.
Thank you, Honorable.
Over to you, General.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I was beginning to deal with questions from Honorable Pierre. And I'm saying the first one was just a comment, but the actual question was on the complaint by the Khoisan. As far as I know, but I can confirm with the Chief Director Operations, the office has not received any complaint from the Khoisan, Chair. Is it correct?
So, General, the ones that we received, it was in the financial year 2018-19, but it related to the process of being integrated into the Defence Force as well as yes. So, but it has been finalized as an office. What is important is that we only investigate complaints that relate to members of the SANDF. So this one is outside of the mandate of the military ombud.
I don't know, Chair, whether you had that input.
You are muted.
Okay. No, I did. Thank you so much. And I thought the crux of Ms. Buka's question was Khoisan SDU, I think, appealing on behalf of the former members of the Defence Force, the SACC.
Yeah.
Yes, whether they've not approached you with a complaint in relation to ex-members of the Defence Force.
Chair, Advocate who says we received their complaint, I think, around the issue of their integration. But then, because
Okay.
But because our Act limits us only to members of the SANDF, we then couldn't deal with that complaint within.
No, point noted.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Then the second question related to the issue of the credibility of our office and the trust around that. Chair, I think this arises from the fact that first and foremost, we get our budget from the SANDF, and of course now there's an arrangement with the Treasury that it is allocated as a line item, so the department can actually not interfere with that. But also the fact that as an office, in terms of logistical support and issues like that, we depend on the Department of Defense. You know, for people who are observing this, they will come to a conclusion that given that dependency, we cannot actually be fair in terms of dealing with their complaints. And of course, what we are actually doing as part of our outreach programs, we actually highlight the fact that there's no interference from the department in terms of how we deal with complaints and the recommendations that we come up with. And Chair, then the next question was on terms of the complaints, categories of complaints, that is simple, complex, and carryover complaints. Perhaps for this, let me also...
May I suggest that you deal with...
Chair, can you hear us?
Yes, I have a problem, but continue. I will only interject when other members are experiencing the same problem. So, members, are you still fine? Members?
The line is also not clear from my side, Chair.
It's also not clear from your side.
Keep losing the general, yes. It keeps cutting.
No, it is the same if everybody, Chair.
Come again?
I'm saying it is like that with everybody, like the previous speaker has spoken.
Oh yes, yeah, that's my problem, General. Okay, continue, General. General, just jump Ms. Motisa's questions. You deal with them immediately after I've concluded this item when you do the presentation on cases.
Yes, Chair, I was still dealing with the question from Honorable Pieters, Chair.
Okay, sure, thanks.
And I wanted to say on the issue of the categories of complaints and how we deem them as simple, complex, and also the carryover, I want to hand over to Advocate Rube just to take us through
that. So we have categorized complaints as follows. So the simple complaints are those that are capable of being resolved within a period of 6 months. So, because the types of complaints, they vary. Sometimes you get a complaint that's a quick resolution matter that will take it in a day. If it's maybe a bar that is asking to get, for example, their pay slip, it's a simple case. So those we say 0. In the annual operational plan, the target for the resolution of...
Chairperson.
Yes, sir.
No, the general is not audible enough. You can't hear it.
Yeah, General, you are a general. I'm sure one of your staff members there has a laptop. Has a laptop or MacBook before him or her. Not so?
Yes.
Yes. Why can't one of your members log in so that if we experience these technical glitches, you are then able to switch and then use that of your member? Because I can see you are all connected to the same, you are all using the same system.
Yes.
Can one of the members, just like you do as I'm doing right now, have his before him or her, so that should you experience a problem, we just hand over you the laptop?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, Chair, we're looking at the possibility of doing that. Maybe allocating one laptop where everybody can talk through.
Yes, you can use both of them so that when you say you are losing you can then immediately switch over to this. In actual fact, a laptop that the colleague could be using, you can have you make the speaker louder, and then you can keep the what you call the audio, what you call this, the video on your bigger screen, but and use the audio on your laptop or MacBook.
We're working on that. Just give us a few minutes.
Okay, but you may continue at the moment. We'll tell you if we're still experiencing the problem.
Okay. Actually, requested Chief Director Operations to just assist me with the answering of the categories of the complaints.
Yes. Okay. Chief Director.
Yes. Thank you, Chairperson. So the first category of complaints, the simple complaints, are those that we determine that they are capable of being resolved within 6 months. So in the annual operational plan, the target that we have set for the resolution of simple cases is 75%. So we need to, by the end of this financial year, have resolved 75% of simple complaints within 6 months. And then we did a second category to say there are those complaints that are more involved in terms of the investigation. Those that we then categorize as complex complaints. So they involved in will take time and human resources, and those are the ones that the target that we set is that they should be resolved within 12 months. Okay, so that's the second category. And the target for the complex cases is that by the end of this financial year, we should have resolved 70% of complex cases within 12 months. And then the last category that Honorable Modise asked about was the carryover complaints. So what is it, and what do we mean by that? So the carryover complaints are at the end of the financial year. That's on the 31st of March of each financial year. We'll then tally all the active complaints. So that is the number that we end off at the end of the financial year that we carry over in the new financial year. So in the past, for example, as an office, we would not separate the active complaints. And there was a concern that was raised even last year when we presented our annual report by the committee to say, but if we are not classifying these cases and separating the carryovers from the new ones, then it is not easy to see whether is the office effective or not. And so when we revised our indicators, we then had a separate indicator for the carryover complaints. And with that, we're saying 75% of those would need to be finalized within 12 months. Now, there's a reason why we put 75% is that the complaints that, for example, at the end of 1920, we had 148 that was brought forward, which would fall within the category of carryovers, is that even on the last day of the financial year,
See, Chief Director, my Prompt Chief Director, we are still going to make a presentation on that. Hence, I said, if we can just mute all the questions that relate to the presentation that we are going to make, just indicate that we are coming to those items. I'm not too sure if you agree, you understand what I'm talking about.
Yes, no, I do. Okay,
yeah,
we'll
making a detailed presentation on all the cases, the carryovers from 2012 right up to now. How many were you started with, the closing balance, the opening balance, the closing balance for each year.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So in the interest of time, I would want that at least those questions be dealt with when we deal with the substantive item on the agenda. Do you agree, Chief Director?
Yes, indeed, Chair.
Yes. Can you go to the interns item? And there was a question on interns by three colleagues, Bukes, Mutle, and Mare.
Chair, for that, I would request Mr. Makhalimela to take us through the issue of the interns.
General indicator, we started with 6 interns, we're now left with 4. The 2 that left are from logistics and the legal section. And now we're left with interns from the investigation, 2 interns from the investigation, 1 in the communications environment, and the last one, executive office. And all those interns, Chair, as the general indicated, they are not paid from the allocation of the office, but they are paid by SACITA.
Just explain the arrangement between yourself and that body, the SACITA, so that we understand how it came about that you have interns paid by from extra sources.
Maybe, Chair, in addition, Chair.
Yes, sir.
Chair.
Yes, Baba.
I'm saying in addition, maybe if they can explain if these interns are recruited by themselves or they requested them from, because sitters normally they do recruitments and then indicate to bodies or departments that may need interns to capacitate them in various areas. Whether is that set up? If that is not the case, the question will be whether them as a body do they advertise, or as a body get interns on their self except the ones from the sitters.
Thank you.
Chair, with your permission for that, I'll hand over to CHR to explain, because the interns come from the department, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members of the PCD. When it comes to the interns, we're all aware that there is a certain allocation that's been taken from all the departments, and we put that money in the Skills Levy Act, in terms of the Skills Levy Act. And all the sectors, especially in this particular case, SACITA also get money from the Skills Levy that all of us contribute, and it is obviously supposed to be given back to all the departments in terms of training. So every year what we do, SASITA will commit a certain amount of money that is given to the Department of Defense, where they will advise us to recruit a number of interns, and every service and division will identify members that they, or should I say members, or maybe I must actually say they will actually come to all the services and say, give us a number of people that we can fund. And then we submit our targets to SASITA. And based on that, SASITA makes the money available. So every service and division, including the military Ombud, now they will identify a requirement from their side, what type of people or occupations they want to fill, utilizing the interns. And on that basis, there's the money that is being given to us. So everyone has got an allocation, and then we use that allocation to bring the interns in the system. What happens now, once we have got that confirmation, then we advertise. And it's not SASITA that advertises on our behalf. The whole services and divisions, including the Ombud, advertising, and then they bring the people in. So the process is actually now decentralized to us. The only thing that we do, we account to them in terms of what we do, and then the skills that we are affording to them as part of them reporting back on terms of the money that has been allocated to them until the year has been completed. But the advantage of it is that once they finish the 1 year, you as the department can also absorb them in your system once you have got certain posts available. So some of the interns, you realize that later on they actually get absorbed in the system, but obviously through the normal process of applying for the post. So yes, the money is coming from SASITA, but the process is us until conclusion of that particular process. And then we allow the people to either come into the system or obviously apply for posts outside the department. Chair, with your permission, there was also a question on the ceiling that they wanted me to commit or to talk on it. I think we're all aware that the wage bill has been a problem for all of us, and the National Treasury has been really hitting us hard on this issue. And some of us that has got money in terms of the operational budget, we always used to fund salaries of the members using their particular budget. And Treasury has now started being very strict, and they don't want to leave the ceiling, because once you have got the money somewhere and you want them to authorize it, you have to request them to leave the ceiling so that you can use other money to pay the salaries. So that's the problem that we've been having with National Treasury. That's why every time now we become in trouble with the Treasury. Even this year, the whole department, we are going to be, the AG has now already pronounced on this particular issue and say, whatever salaries that we paid that was not within the allocation, irrespective of whether it was coming from the department, we have been found to be irregular. And then I think it's going to go to SCOPA as we speak, probably in the near future. So Ombud is in the same situation, because they can only pay salaries using a certain number of posts or number of people. And then if they go beyond that, they will actually sit in the same situation as us. I can confirm, Chair, to say the money of the military Ombud is being ring-fenced in terms of salaries. We don't touch from the DoD the salaries or from the military Ombud. It's been ring-fenced and it can be accounted to them accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's just that when there's a cut, you pass on the cut to other agencies within the department.
Absolutely.
Okay. No, thanks. All right, colleagues, can we quickly take the second presentation? And as you present, General, you know the questions that have been raised in relation to the second presentation. You'll be dealing with those questions.
you, Chair. The presentation will be made by Advocate Duna. So she's just setting up she'll proceed as soon as she's ready.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the presentation is to brief the committee on the status of complaints and investigations. We start off the presentation by giving you the statistical analysis over the 8-year period since establishment. The focus of this presentation, though, is on the financial year 1920. During the 1920 financial year, we had a caseload of 587, which is comprised of 279 complaints were carried over from the previous financial year, and 308 new complaints were received during the financial year. Out of the 587, we managed to finalize 439, which translates to a 75% finalization rate. The average turnaround time for the 439 complaints that we finalized was 247 days, which is approximately 8 months. So Honorable Modise wanted to understand this analysis that we provided of the 8 months. So what we do when we work out what is the average turnaround time, we would look at each the number of days that we have taken per case. So the 439, you'll find that there's one complaint that is received within 14 days. There are other complaints that perhaps takes 12 months or so to resolve. We then add the number of days of the 400 number of days of that we finalize, and we divide them by the number finalized 439, which then gives us the average of 247, which, as we say, amounts to 8 months. Okay, so as at the 31st of March, we closed off the financial year with 148, which is now becomes the opening balance as of the 1st of April 2021. In terms of the nature of complaints, for the financial year 1920, we found that the majority of the new complaints that we received, the 308, came from members of the Defence Force. In fact, a total of 306 were complaints from members of the Defence Force that relate to their service conditions. We only had 2 complaints from members of the public. And then there was a question earlier about, is the picture still the same? You will see when we get to the slide where we talk about complaints from 2021, that the picture certainly has changed. The Ombud provided the number. So as of to date, we are sitting with 29 complaints from members of the public that relate to the official conduct from against the Defence Force. We've also now classified these 308 to say, we know that majority are complaining about conditions of service, but what exactly are they complaining about? So the majority of complaints relate to not being promoted, where a member believes that they should have been promoted. And in fact, that category of complaints are the highest in terms of the categorization at 61. We also receive complaints that relate to undue delays in processes when a member has terminated the force and there's delays in finalizing the termination process. Okay, so that's relating to service benefits. So members are finding that their pension benefits are not paid on time and so on. So that then becomes number 2 in terms of what members are complaining about. The third category relates to complaints around remuneration. The issue was about unauthorized deductions, where members were complaining that when they look at their salary pay slips, they find that there's been deductions. However, they were not aware what those deductions were about. Okay, so that is in terms of the categorization of the number of complaints that we received in 1920. We also, Chair, did an analysis as to where the complaints are coming from with regards to the services in the Defence Force, the 308 complaints that we received. The majority of complaints come from members of the SA Army, which is followed by the SAMS, the Military Hospital Services, and the complaints within the Air Force comes in third. We do receive in the previous financial year, we received one odd complaint of a member who was serving in the previous South African Defence Force, who, of course, unfortunately, we were unable to assist because it doesn't fall within the mandate of the office. You will find that under the public, so maybe we need to just provide an explanation for the members so that the numbers make sense. So the office receives complaints from members of the public. Others are acting on behalf of former members. For example, we receive complaints from spouses who were complaining about access to the benefits of their former spouses who served in the Defence Force. They also complained from members of the public, but that relates to access to the service conditions. There were only 2 complaints from members of the public that talked to the official conduct. So that is why you see the total number of complaints from members of the public here is 13. But when you look at what the issue they're complaining about, only 2 of the 13 related to the service conditions. We also received quite a number last year of members from the non-statutory forces. And when we looked at what the issue was about, they were complaining really about accessing the military veterans benefits. And that is the 44 that you have there as the last category. With regards to the geographic spread, so we did an analysis to see where mostly our complainants are based. In the previous financial year, we received 95 complaints of complainants who are based in the Northwest. This is followed by Gauteng at 81, and the rest is spread amongst the other provinces. We are seeing that in respect of Mpumalanga and the Northern Cape, that is the provinces where we received the least number of complaints. We also wanted, as a note there that we put the chair to note the increase from the complaints in the Northwest, because if you compare it with the trends in the previous financial years, is that we were receiving a number of complaints within the Gauteng province. However, in 1920, we received a number of complaints in the Northwest, and this was as a direct result of the outreach that was done, in particular with the Military Veterans Association. From that outreach meeting, there were about 65 new complaints that were lodged, and that is why you're finding that Northwest is now the highest when you compare with the previous financial years. The question regarding implementation and non-implementation of recommendations. So we provided the statistics as to in the financial year 1920, how many recommendations were implemented by the Defence Force. 10, we found that 10 were implemented. And at the end of March 31st, we had 14 cases that were still awaiting implementation. on record, we only have 4 cases which the minister had not accepted for implementation, and in fact had directed that these be taken on review in respect of to that be taken on review. And we also found an increase in the number of cases that we resolved by mediation, conciliation, what we refer broadly as ADR. So that then the office doesn't necessarily need to make a finding, uphold a complaint and make a finding with recommendations. And the total of those ones that were resolved amicably with the Defence Force is through the various platforms of meeting with the services and also liaising with the Office of the Chief via the liaison forum. The total of those were 14 that were resolved amicably. Now, this then concludes the statistics for 1920. Now, coming to the current financial year, as we said, from 1st April, we opened with 148, which is the carryovers for the previous financial year. And between April and to date, the office received a total of 82 new complaints. How are those categorized is that 46 of the 82 relate to conditions of service, so complaints lodged by Defence Force members. And 29 are complaints from members of the public who are complaining about the conduct of the soldiers. The 7, which we've referred to as other complaints, are complaints from members of the public who were not complaining particularly about conduct of the Defence Force. I'll give an example, Chair. The members of the public who write and say, since the lockdown, they've not seen any, SAPS members or police. And there was one complainant who said he was worried about their parents, his father not complying with the lockdown. So strictly speaking, and then there was another member who commended the deployment of the Defence Force. So strictly speaking, those are not complaints that fall within our mandate, but were lodged by members of the public. And that is a total of 7. So when you look at what we've done to date about the 82 new complaints, 18 of those ones have already gone through a process of assessment and have been accepted, and they're under investigation. We managed to date to finalize 24 complaints of the new 82, and we have a remainder of 40 that is still going through the process of assessment. So the outcome of the 40 could be that a case will be accepted for investigation, or it could be referred to an appropriate body, or it might be that a member has lodged a complaint prematurely and they would be advised to go back and, if it's a member of the Defence Force, exhaust the IGR process. Now, this then brings us to the total cases that are active. So if you add the 148 that we received, that we had brought forward, plus the 82 new, and we minus the ones that we have finalized to date. So the current active cases on the system is 199. And we've also provided the age of these cases. This too, Chair, comes about as a result of the concern that the committee had raised when we presented our AR last year, that when we present a total caseload of, for example, 199, but there's no indication as to how old the cases are, including, for example, the 148 that we brought forward in this current financial year. And so we are providing now this analysis that unfortunately we still have a case of 1617 that has been brought forward as one, And for 17-18 financial year, we've got 12. However, we should indicate, though, that in respect of those cases, it's 13 in total. They are at various stages of finalization. Our priority really is to focus on these ones, and the Ombud has indicated on many occasions that the mandate of the office is to be expeditious, and so we need to finalize these matters, including the ones, the 58 for 18-19. And for 1920, the complaints that we received in 1920 that are currently active is 70. And of course, the 58 is the new matters that we received in the current financial year 2021. So, Chair, that brings me to the end of the presentation. Perhaps I should conclude on about how we determine the turnaround times. Oh, yes. Chair, I'm also reminded that as the committee had requested that we also provide information relating to the gender of complaints. It's not on the presentation, but if the chair permits, I can just give an indication to the members as to during the 1920, the number of complaints that we received in respect of the gender, how that looks like. I need the... So, Chairperson, with respect to the gender of complaints, we found that of the 308 that we received in 1920, 80% of those ones came from male. So a total of 245 complaints were from male. Only 62 were from females, and one complainant requested to remain anonymous, so they didn't disclose their gender. Yeah. That then concludes, Chairperson, my presentation. I wanted to just touch on the question around the turnaround times. So the targets that we have set, certainly in the annual operational plan, of the three sub indicators, is that in respect of the simple complaints, we are targeting to finalize those within 6 months. And in respect to what we refer to as complex cases, the target is 12 months. And of course, the one relating to carryovers is also 12 months. There is a proviso in relation to the carryovers, is that because we continue during the financial year, even on the last day of the financial year, we continue to receive new complaints. So for example, a case on the 31st that is registered on the 31st of March, it will be recorded as a carryover, even though in terms of age, it's only 1 day old in the system. So on the 1st of April, that complaint is 1 day old, but for the purposes of providing the report, it's recorded as a case that is carried over from the previous financial year. All right, Ombud, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Colleagues, we have about 6 minutes remaining. General Masonda? Yes. Yeah, there is about 6 minutes remaining. And so may I suggest that all the questions, just note the questions. I don't expect the department to respond to them. We'll then write them up and then send them to the department with the request that they be replied to in writing. Okay, just note the questions. And let me start with Modise. Modise, you still want to make a follow-up because you asked questions on this. Modise and Bioko. Yes, just note, I want you to note further questions. Modise?
Thanks, Chair. My question earlier was also towards the carried over cases and the financial implications thereof. How do then they deal with such? And I did not get any response to that. And the distinction between the complaints from members in uniform and those from the public, the priority thereof of dealing with those cases. Thank you, Chair. And I think the rest of other cases of other questions were then responded to. Or also the communication. I also asked, do they then, after they've done investigations and they've made recommendations to the department, and then the department decides to review the recommendations thereof, does the military ombuds then communicate to the complainant that these are the findings, these are recommendations that we would have made, but then we are awaiting implementation from the department? Thank you, Chair.
You're on mute.
Mr. Speakers, you also asked questions on cases. Do you want to make follow-up?
No, Chair, I'm fine.
Thank you, I'm fine. Yes, Mr. Murray, you also have questions on one. Just for noting today, because there will be no time for them to respond now. Mr. Murray?
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Just with the military ombud, I want to make sure that it is not only serving members of the permanent force that is currently under the jurisdiction of the military ombud, but also reserve force members, because there's a number of queries that one get on from time to time from reserve force members, and what do they do about that? Then secondly, there's a number of cases that I'm aware of where the military ombud made a recommendation and the minister has supported that by signing it off, but there's no implementation of that. And that probably comes back to the previous submission that we've had, where there's no reaction from the Defence Force, and it seems like there's a delay, and sometimes it has to be redone and resubmitted. I mean, somewhere along the line, we need to know what can be done, because that is cases that is then unresolved, in my opinion. Then also, I want to ask the military ombud, in some cases, they have responded by saying that they will refer a specific complaint to the SANDF for investigation. Why do they do that? If they are independent and if they are without fear of favor, why do they first refer certain cases for investigation to the SANDF, and only subsequent to that, then they will make a call whether they do the investigation themselves? That looks a bit contradictory, and I'm not sure whether it's, they're waiting for, the hand that them to think whatever they do. That is a concern. And then lastly, my last one is just on the Collins Causa case, how far are they and when will they finalize that investigation and get back to us on that? Thank you very much.
Fine, thank you so much. Thabo, there was one question that was not answered.
Thanks, Chair.
Thabo? Yes.
Thanks, Chair. It was the question on the set aside on youth empowerment, particularly on the procurement that the Ombudsman is doing, taking into consideration the fact that we have seen an increase in their budget on what do they call it, on goods and services. I don't know whether it's equipment and what machinery, something like that. Those two items, we have seen an increase in terms of their budget from the past financial year to this next financial year. To what an extent is the Ombudsman deliberately taking an action to ensure that it empowers youth and women in terms of their procurement? And secondly, Chair, is with regard to, I've just noted it, let me, secondly is with regard to the intention. My question was not answered. Do they have planned to absorb the current 4 that they have in their system, or they are just going to allow them go and see for themselves and add up to the unemployment rate?
Okay. No, thank you very much. Let me thank the team, General Masondo and colleagues that are accompanying him. Thank you, colleagues, for the engagement this morning. Let me promise you that all the questions will be reduced to writing and sent to the General Masondo with the request that they be replied to in writing within a specified date. On that note, colleagues, we have run out of time. We're just a few seconds over. Let me thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues. The meeting has come to an end.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.